town of Kringle's Hollow didn't celebrate Christmas. They observed the solstice. For as long as the town records went back, stone tablets in the library basement, December 21st was a day of quiet lockdown, of drawn curtains and offered silence. Outsiders thought it was a quaint pagan tradition. Newcomers like the Miller family, David, Sarah, and their curious 8-year-old Liam, were politely but firmly told, "Stay inside after dark, no lights, no sounds. Leave a bowl of raw oats and a cup of honey on the doorstep." David, a skeptical journalist, thought it was charming folklore. On their first solstice, he decided to document it. "A piece on unique American traditions," he told his worried wife. As the winter sun dipped below the pines, the town shut down. It was absolute. No streetlights, no TV glow from windows. The Miller's house on a hill overlooking the main street was the only one with a flickering candle in the window. David's atmosphere. At precisely 7 p.m. the temperature plummeted. The wind died. The world became preternaturally still. Through his camera's night vision lens trained on the street below, David saw it. A sleigh, but not one from a storybook. It was low, long and black, carved from what looked like petrified wood, pulled not by reindeer but by 8 large shaggy shapes that moved with a strange loping gait. They had too many antler points like jagged thorns. The driver stepped down. He was tall, broad, and clad in deep animal furs. His beard was not white but a dark matted brown. He carried a horn, not a bell, which he raised to his lips. The sound it made was a low, mournful bray that seemed to freeze the very air. In response, doors along the street opened just a crack. Unseen hands slid bowls out. The figure moved from house to house. He would sniff the offering, sometimes taking it, pouring it into a large sack on his sleigh. At other houses, he would stop, stare at the door for a long moment, grunt, and move on. No presents were delivered. "It's just a weird historical reenactment," David whispered, fascinated. Then the figure stopped in the middle of the empty street. He slowly turned his head. Up the hill, directly toward the Miller's house, toward the single defiant candlelight. He dropped his sack and began to walk. His stride was impossibly long, covering yards with each step. "David, blow out the candle," Sarah hissed from behind him. He fumbled, but it was too late. From their porch, they heard a heavy sniffing. Then a voice, deep and resonant as a glacial crevasse, spoke. "No offering. Only light. A watching light." A fist wrapped in filthy fur pounded on the door. Once. The solid oak door splintered inward. He filled the doorway. Up close, he was not jolly. His face was weathered and hard, his eyes the pale blue of ancient ice. He smelled of pine sap, wet earth, and something metallic. "You watch the old gift giver," he boomed. "You take but do not give. The balance is broken." "We're sorry," Sarah pleaded, clutching Liam. "We didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse, it is a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum." His icy gaze fell on Liam. The child. He has taken many gifts in his years. Toys, sweets, laughter. The account is in deficit. The solstice is for settling debts. He reached for Liam. David jumped in front, his camera flashing. The burst of light and sound made the giant flinch. He roared, a sound of rage and pain, and swatted the camera. It shattered against the wall. "You bring summer's fire into winter's heart," he thundered. "You break the oldest pact." He advanced, no longer the methodical collector from the street, but a force of primal fury. As he grabbed David's shoulder, David felt an unnatural cold seeping into his bones, a sapping weariness, the feeling of years being pulled from him. In the struggle, the bowl of oats and honey, still sitting by their door, was kicked over, spilling onto the giant's boot. He stopped, looked down. The fury drained from his face, replaced by a cold, procedural calm. He looked from the spilled offering to the terrified family. An offering was made, he rumbled, as if consulting an internal ledger. It was rejected by the Watchers Act, but it was made. The intent is noted. He released David, who slumped, feeling decades older, his hair now streaked with gray. The giant straightened his furs. The debt is not cleared. It is transferred. He pointed a thick finger at Liam. Next solstice. A gift of equal value must be given. Not bought, made, grown, or earned. Something of true substance. Leave it where the offering bowl sits. He turned and walked out into the silent night. They watched from their broken door as he returned to his sleigh, took up his horn, and brayed once more. The thorn-antlered creatures lunged forward, and the dark sleigh vanished into the forest. The next morning, the town was back to normal. No one spoke of the solstice. When asked, the old shopkeeper just looked at David's newly gray hair and Liam's pale face and said, "The gift giver doesn't give toys, he enforces balance. He takes what's been too freely given, or he collects a gift of equal weight. You traded years for a lesson. Your boy better start working on his gift. The list for next year is already being written." And in Liam's room, they found a single crude wooden figurine left on his pillow. It was a likeness of him, his face carved in a scream. It was the first gift the old gift giver had left in Kringle's Hollow in living memory. A receipt and a reminder. The solstice wasn't about getting. It was about settling accounts. And their family was now deeply in debt. You know that feeling on Christmas Eve? That childish hope that somehow this year you've done enough. That the good will outweigh the bad. For 17-year-old Leo, that feeling had died years ago. Christmas was just a day off, a reason for his arguing parents to fake smiles. This year, he was staying up late in his basement bedroom, ignoring the forced carols from upstairs, immersed in a gritty war game online. His headset was on, explosions rattling his ears, when his character rounded a ruined wall and froze. Not in game. His entire computer screen went black. Then, in a font that looked like jagged, dripping ink, a single line appeared. Leo Martin, 47% naughty. Leo scoffed. "Great, a virus!" He yanked the cord, but the text remained glowing faintly on the dead monitor. A chill, sharp and sudden, pierced the room. The basement's usual hum vanished, the furnace shut off, the faint music from above ceased. The silence was absolute, a thick, cottony void. A soft thump came from the top of the basement stairs, then another. Not footsteps. It sounded like a heavy bag being dragged. Down the wooden steps. Leo's breath hitched. "Mom? Dad?" His voice was a dry whisper. The thumping stopped at the bottom of the stairs. From his room, he could only see the edge of the laundry area. A shadow stretched across the concrete floor, a massive, distorted silhouette. It wasn't the shape of a man, it was too broad, too lumpy. A voice, like gravel shifting in a rusted can, echoed in the stillness. "Leo Martin, account pending." Leo scrambled back in his chair, fumbling for his phone. No service. The lights in his room began to dim, not flicker, but dim, as if the light itself was being drained. From around the corner, it stepped into view. It wore a red suit, but it was stained a deep, burnt umber like old blood. The white trim was yellowed and frayed. Its black boots were caked in a substance that looked like mud and soot but smelled faintly of rust and frozen meat. But it was the face that stopped Leo's heart. There was no jovial beard, no twinkling eyes. The skin was pale and waxy, pulled tight over a skeletal frame. Where eyes should have been were deep, dark sockets that seemed to swallow the faint light. In one gloved hand, it dragged a huge burlap sack that bulged with awkward, angular shapes. In the other, it held a long, tattered scroll. Review time, the thing grated. It unrolled the scroll, its head tilted, sockets aiming at Leo. December 14th. Told your mother her cooking tasted like regret. A point against. Well, what are you? Leo stammered. August 22nd. Allowed your friend Mark to cheat off your algebra test. Enabled deception, a point against. It took a step closer, its boots squelching on the floor. The sack behind it shifted with a sound of clacking sticks. That's not fair, Leo cried, backing against his wall. I helped a friend. The system weighs actions, not intent, it droned. October 31st, egged Mr. Henderson's car, vandalism, 3 points against. It was now at the doorway of his room. It had to stoop to fit under the frame. A smell of cold soil and decay rolled off it. Please, Leo whispered, I'll be better. I swear. The creature's head cocked. Assessment is not penitence. The list is absolute. It rolled up the scroll and tapped a bony finger against its chin. Current standing, 47% naughty. The threshold for coal is 45%. The threshold for reallocation is 50%. It reached into a pouch on its belt and pulled out a single lumpy black lump of coal. It held it out. A warning, a nudge back toward Nice. Trembling, Leo reached for the coal. As his fingers brushed it, a searing cold like dry ice shot up his arm. He gasped, dropping it. It hit the floor and didn't bounce. It sank into the concrete, leaving a black, oily stain. Your choice is noted, the thing intoned. Its free hand snapped out faster than a snake and grabbed Leo's wrist. The grip was iron cold. But actions have inertia. A 3% margin is too narrow for error. A probationary period is required. From its sack, it drew not a toy but a small old-fashioned hourglass. The sand inside was black. It flipped it over. 1 year. When this runs out, I return. If your percentage has dropped, you get a gift. If it has risen, you become a gift. It released him. Leo cradled his numb wrist where 5 frost-burned blisters in the shape of fingers were already rising. The creature turned, hefting its groaning sack. Merry Christmas, Leo, it rasped, the words a curse. It walked back into the shadows at the base of the stairs. Leo heard one final thump. Then the lights buzzed back on. The furnace roared to life. Upstairs, Bing Crosby was singing about a white Christmas. Leo was alone. On his desk, the black hourglass sat. The sand, finer than any he'd ever seen, was already pouring down. He looked at his computer screen. It was normal. His game paused. But in the reflection of the dark monitor, he could still see the faint glowing text. Leo Martin, 48% naughty. The choice of dropping the coal had cost him a point. The countdown had already begun.